Welcome back to Caritas Quaerens. We're in the middle of a video series about some commonly asked questions and objections to Christian universalism, or apokatastasis, as I prefer to call it. And so today I'm going to tackle what I think is maybe the thorniest issue. And oddly enough, if you're sticking with me this far, this might be where some of you start to say, this guy's a little bit nutsy. I don't know. But it is the fate of Judas. And I'm going to focus on two particular passages. So first one, again, I'm using the Revised Standard Version Catholic edition. Okay, and I don't know if you're a Protestant. I don't really know. I haven't seen a whole ton of stuff about like the damnation of Judas, but I know from a lot of Catholic tradition, especially some older Catholic materials, I've seen a lot about this, and it almost seems like some people take a kind of joy in trying to prove that Judas must be in hell. Many will point out that the church has never anti-canonized anyone. There are thousands, maybe even millions, probably not millions, I don't know, but there are thousands upon thousands of people who have been canonized, who have been declared to be saints in heaven, but not one person has ever been declared to be in hell. Not even Judas, despite some popular renditions like the comedy, the Divine Comedy by Dante. But despite that, there are some people who seem to revel in proving that, well, at least Judas must be there. Okay? So let's take a look. I've read some things about this, and in fact, just what kind of spurred me on to do more research on this was a couple months ago, I guess it was, I read an article where it was talking about the possibility that Judas might be saved, and then some rebuttals of that, which were just like vociferous about how ludicrous it is that Judas might possibly be saved, even that it's and they made arguments that it's evidently clear in Scripture that Judas is in hell. And so that's why we're going to take a look at a couple of scriptural passages here where I'm going to argue I don't think it's at all just manifestly evident that Judas is in hell from Scripture. Probably the most cited passage is the beginning of Matthew 26 here. It's Matthew 26. I'm sorry, it's not the beginning. It's, whoops, I lost my page, that's why. Matthew 26. I lost it. Hold on a second. I'm going to pause this. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. I lost my page here. I'm outside. It was a little breezy, and I just looked down, right away, and I was at the wrong passage. Sorry. It is Matthew 26, but it's not in the beginning. It's Matthew 26, verses 24 and 25 I'm going to focus on here. This is of the Last Supper, and Jesus has just announced to the disciples, truly I say to you, one of you will betray me. And they were very sorrowful and began to say to him one after another, is it I, Lord? He answered, he who has dipped his hand in the dish with me will betray me. And here's where we pick up here, verse 24. The Son of Man goes as it is written of him, but woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been better for that man if he had not been born. Judas, who betrayed him, said, is it I, Master? He said to him, you have said so. Okay, so clearly there, Judas is being identified as the one who betrayed Jesus, and there's no doubt there, I don't think, right? So then some will say, well, look, it says that, woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. So woe to Judas. It would have been better if he had not been born. Okay? Now, here's something that I never realized before. And I came across this, I forget where it was, some obscure little article or something I read. And again, I'm not an expert in Greek, I will say, but I have a fair acquaintance with it. And so I looked this up, and it made a lot of sense to me. So I don't know if you know more about this, or you can research this and find out something, and you can refute me. Go for it, okay? But I want to point out here, if you look at this in the Greek, and I'm going to try to simplify this, verse 24, okay? The Son of Man goes as is written of him, but woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. So clearly, in that first clause there, we have two people: the Son of Man, who's going to be betrayed, and that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. Obviously Judas, right? So he's talking about the Son of Man himself, Jesus, and Judas, who is identified as that man. Now, the phrase "that man" in Greek, ekainos anthropos, I think it is. Okay, that man. Then the next clause here, he says, "It would have been better for that man if he had not been born. Now, this translation, I think, does a little bit of a disservice here, because the original Greek doesn't say it would have been better for that man if he had not been born. It says it would have been better for him, or the same man. The Greek word here is it's basically like a preposition, autos, which means literally the same one, okay, the same person, the same man in this case, all right? It says it would have been better for the same man if that man had not been born. So what's going on here is in both clauses, Jesus is using the expression ekenos anthropos, that man. The first time, it's obviously referring to Judas. It makes sense that the second time it would also refer to Judas, okay? Nobody's doubting that. But in the first clause, he's also referring to himself, okay? The Son of Man is going to be betrayed, but woe to that man, ekenos anthropos, that man who's going to betray him. Then he goes on to say, it would have been better for the same man if that man had not been born, okay? So it makes sense that if he's talking about Jesus and Judas in the first clause, that in the second clause, he would also be referring to Jesus and Judas. So in other words, when it says it would have been better for, here it says, it would have been better for that man if he had not been born. When it says that man here, the first one, it's referring to Jesus. What it's literally saying in the Greek is, it would have been better for the same man, in other words, Jesus, the Son of Man, if that man, Judas, the betrayer, had not been born. Okay, and it's even more interesting in the Greek because in the Greek, in the first part there, I hope this is making sense. In the first part, it doesn't actually, it doesn't refer to the Son of Man first. It refers to that man first. So it says, woe to that man, ekenos anthropos, by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. So it's talking about that man, Judas, then the Son of Man being betrayed. Then it says it would have been better for the same man. And autos, the same man, it would make sense syntactically if it's referring back to the most recently mentioned person, who in this case would be the Son of Man being betrayed, right? So if you're following here, what I'm saying is, the Greek is saying, woe to that man, ekenos anthropos, Judas, by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. So we got that man betraying the Son of Man, second, okay? It would have been better for the same man, and we just talked about the Son of Man, so it makes sense that the same man is going to refer to the Son of Man, okay, the second person we mentioned first, okay? If that man, again, that man is referring to Judas again. So there's what I think is called a chiasmus. In other words, it's when you are referring to two things two times. And the first time, it's like AB. The second time, you invert it. It's BA. Okay? So, like, let me try to come up with an example off the top of my head. Like, if I said, later today, I am going to the grocery store and the pharmacy. Okay? So that's two things. Grocery store, pharmacy, right? Because I need medicine and something to eat. Okay? So now I'm referring basically again to the pharmacy where I'm going to get medicine and the grocery store where I need something to eat. Okay? But notice I inverted it. I'm going to the grocery store and the pharmacy. Maybe I should say, I'm going to get some medicine at that place and get some food at the other place or something, okay? And so it's kind of a little slight rhetorical trick here to kind of invert what you're talking about the second time around. That seems to be what might be happening here in the Greek, okay? When it's talking about, woe to that man, Judas, by whom the Son of Man is betrayed, talking about Judas and then the Son of Man, then it would have been better for the same man, Jesus, Son of Man, Jesus, if that man, Judas, had not been born, okay? So what Jesus might be saying here is not, I'm really going on about this a long time. I'm trying to explain this. It's kind of hard to explain, but what Jesus might not be saying it would be better for Judas if Judas had not been born, but rather it would be better for Jesus if Judas had not been born, giving us a kind of vivid rhetorical display of how awful it is that Judas is going to betray him. Okay. Anyway, even if that's false, though, notice it does not say it would have been better for that man if he had not been conceived, okay, or had not come into existence, but just if he had not been born. So that seems to imply, that at least something good is going to come of Judas. It would have been better if he had not been born, because then at least he would have died in utero or something, and he probably would have gone straight to heaven, or would have had a lot less to be purified of. So anyway, sorry there, I had to pause that for a minute because kids coming home and it was going to get kind of loud in the background. So anyway, I want to say though, even if maybe I'm wrong about the interpretation of some of that passage in Matthew 26, but at the very least, it doesn't seem to me that it's just absolutely evident or manifest that it implies that Judas went to hell. It could be interpreted. That's all I wish to show. It could be interpreted in other ways. The other passage that is often brought forward is in the Acts of the Apostles, chapter 1, and it is verse 25, and it's when they're choosing a replacement for Judas, and Peter's speaking up, and they choose Matthias, and then it says, starting in verse 24, they prayed and said, Lord, thou knowest the hearts of all men, show which one of these two thou hast chosen to take the place in this ministry and apostleship from which Judas turned aside to go to his own place. Okay, and some will say that when it talks about Judas turning aside to go to his own place, that's implying that he is going to hell. Hell is often seen as a place of ultimate selfishness. In other words, it's my will, not thy will. I think it was C.S. Lewis that said the motto of heaven is thy will be done, and the motto of hell is my will be done, or something like that. In fact, I remember even hearing Venerable Fulton Sheen talk about this one time when he was talking about Judas, and he said, what a pathetic expression that is to say that Judas went away to his own place. Basically this was the place he had chosen for himself, to be by himself, apart from God, forever. Now I want to tell kind of a story about this, because when I heard that, I was intrigued, and I thought of that passage where Jesus says in John, when he says, I'm going to be going away. He says, but don't be afraid. I'm going to prepare a place for you. Okay. And I thought, you know what? I bet that if you look at the Greek there, when Jesus says, I'm going to prepare a place for you, it's a different Greek word from here in Acts when it says that Judas went to his own place. In other words, I was thinking, Greek is a very rich language. Greek oftentimes has, multiple words for what we have at just one word, and they express subtle differences of nuance, right? So I was thinking, I bet that the Greek actually uses different words here. Judas going to his own place is one word, and Jesus preparing a place for us is a second word. And imagine my dismay when I found they were actually the same word, topos, which is just kind of a generic word for place in Greek. So interestingly enough, I was thinking you could actually, if you do sort of a word study of this word, this Greek word topos, you could theoretically, I think you could legitimately make a connection here and say Jesus promised that he was going to go and prepare a place, topos, for each of them. Okay? So, including Judas. Jesus was going to go and prepare a place for Judas. And what happened here in Acts 25, it says that Judas went to his own place. He went to the place which Jesus prepared for him. Okay? So that's kind of interesting, isn't it? Notice it doesn't say that he turned aside from life or turned aside from, it just says he turned aside from the ministry and apostleship. So in other words, he kind of cut short, premature the ministry and apostleship that Christ had set aside for him to go to his own place, to go to the place that had been prepared for him. It would have been nice if, it would have been better for him and better for others if he had stuck it out and stayed in the apostleship and done a lot of good deeds in charity. Kind of like the sheep and the goats, if he had stayed a sheep, but he became a goat. And so he went to his own place prematurely, in my mind, that may be all that's really being said here. It may not really be at all condemning Judas to, a kind of place of ultimate selfishness in hell. But I don't know, I could be wrong. At the very least, all I wish to say is that these passages, as far as I can see, and I think anybody who looks at this with a clear and unbiased opinion, it's not clearly teaching that Judas is in hell. That's a bit of a stretch, and it involves some interpretation and some, I think you could say, some eisegesis, some reading into the text somewhat. Now maybe that's true, and maybe Judas is in hell, and maybe that tradition warrants reading that into the text and interpreting it in that light, and sometimes that's the case. But I don't think using these passages out of context and apart from any kind of tradition like that, I don't think warrant that. So anyway, why is this so important, by the way? I remember actually having a conversation with some friends about this one time, and I was kind of shocked at how affronted they seemed when I made the argument that maybe, just possibly, Judas might be in heaven. Well, I think it's actually very important because, in fact, I would, part of me almost thinks it would be kind of nice to consider Judas the patron saint of the damned, because I think it kind of gives great hope. My understanding of the spiritual life and of the virtue of hope in specific is that, as I think Consours from Balthasar intimates, that we should always, when we're looking at ourselves individually, we should always be concerned about the threat of damnation for ourselves. But for others, the first thought should be hope of heaven, hope of salvation. And I think that there's some real experiential wisdom in that. Because the reality is, I know myself fairly well. In fact, more often than not, what I don't know about myself only appalls me when I realize just how bad I am. It's oftentimes darkness that gets revealed to me in my own soul. So I know myself pretty well. I know I'm pretty bad, and I feel like in the Psalms when David prays, to even forgive my hidden faults, have mercy on me even for my hidden faults. I can't. When I say I can't, I literally can't excuse myself because I know my own intentions. I know, exactly why I do the things I do and how bad they are, and so but that's not the case with other people. I might see the effects of other people's actions, but I don't necessarily know all that went into their choices. I don't know all the mitigating circumstances that there might be. And so I have to assume, out of charity, that other people, I have to give them the best possible spin I can without being totally unreasonable. And I have to assume, maybe there are mitigating circumstances. Maybe other people have, a culpable ignorance, or some kind of force. That sounds kind of goofy, new agey. But I mean, maybe they're being compelled or coerced in some way to do certain things. So realistically, experientially, I think it makes sense to me that I have to see myself as Paul does, as the foremost of sinners. And therefore, I have to see everybody else as, at least potentially, at least as far as I can surmise, far better than myself. And if that's the case, then even the worst of others, like Judas, if I can say that even he who seems, if I'm going to condemn anybody else, he's one of the worst, right? If at least there's hope for him, then that means that there's hope for me, if even the one who it's hardest to have hope for, if there's hope for him, then even I, who it's very hard to have hope for, there's hope for me. So I think it's actually very important that we hold out hope for Judas. I think it really gives hope to each of us individually. And like I said, I'd like to see Judas as the patron saint of the damned. My opinion is that possibly the doctrine of endless hell and universalism could be reconciled by the fact that all people go to hell. If that's the case, why, glory, hallelujah, that means that Judas is a prime example of that, of a terrible sinner who went to hell and was saved by Christ. Now I'm not saying that dogmatically, so before people start pointing fingers and saying, I'm a gross heretic and everything, but I'm just saying I think it's only charitable that we hold out hope even for Judas. And at the very least out of charity, stop flinging, these Bible verses that, are not by any stretch of the word self-evident or manifestly showing the damnation of Judas. Stop flinging those around as if they're, clear proclamations of his damnation, and cut the guy a break, and hold out some hope. Not because of him, not for Judas's sake, but because of God, because he is love, and he is merciful. And, oh God of mercy, I hope you have mercy on Judas, because I hope that you'll have mercy on me too. Maybe I need it more than he does. Till next time, adios.